All right, let's dive right in. We're talking about a book that's, well, it's pretty legendary, and let's be honest, a little notorious. Robert Greene's The 48 Laws of Power. This is the one that really pulls back the curtain on how power has worked, throughout all of history. So, right off the bat, the book hits you with this massive question. Is power a game? A game with rules that have basically stayed the same forever? And Greene's answer is a big, loud yes. He says, look, power is a game. And just like any game, it has rules. And these aren't new rules either. We're talking about the same playbook used by kings, queens, con artists, you name it, for thousands of years. So you gotta ask, what are these timeless rules? Well, let's find out. The real power of this book, pun intended, is its deep dive into history. This isn't just Robert Greene's hot take on things. Nope. He's pulling together wisdom and, just as importantly, cautionary tales from everybody. We're talking Machiavelli, Sun Tzu, Queen Elizabeth I, even Henry Kissinger. It's like he's taking all these ancient strategies and boiled them down into a single manual on the mechanics of power. Okay, so what exactly is this game we're talking about? Well, the book lays it out like this. Power is basically a social dynamic that doesn't really care about good or evil. It's amoral. Now, just to be super clear, our goal here isn't to give you a playbook on how to be a tyrant, not at all. It's about understanding the rules that Greene has identified. Why? Because whether we like it or not, this game, it's being played all around us, every single day. So, let's break this down. The first big theme is all about perception. The book argues that real power, it doesn't always start with your actions. Nope. It starts with how other people see you. It's all about mastering your own image. And this brings us to the very first law, and maybe the most important one to remember. Never outshine the master. The idea is actually pretty simple. Your job is to make the people above you feel brilliant and secure. If you come in and you're just too good, too talented, you're not going to get a pat on the back. You're going to inspire fear and insecurity. And that's a dangerous game to play. And here's a perfect example of what happens when you get this right and when you get it horribly wrong. On one hand, you've got this Minister Fouquet. He throws this ridiculously amazing party. So amazing, in fact, that it made his boss, King Louis XIV, feel small and insecure. And his reward for this great party? Life in prison. Ouch. Now flip that. Look at Galileo. He makes this incredible discovery, the moons of Jupiter, but instead of naming them after himself, he dedicates them to his patrons, the Medici family. He literally put their name in the stars. He made them look good, and in return, they funded his work for life. See the difference? This all feeds into the next big idea, Law 5, and it's a heavy one. So much depends on reputation. Guard it with your life. Think about it. Your reputation is the thing that walks into the room before you do. It can open doors for you or slam them shut. It's doing your work for you, good or bad, 24/7. That's why the book is so intense about this. You have to build it brick by brick and then defend it like a fortress. And if you want to see just how powerful a reputation can be, you have to hear this story about General Liang. It's from ancient China. So, Liang's army is totally outnumbered. His rival, Sima Yi, is right outside the city, ready to crush him. It's over, right? Wrong. What does Liang do? He opens the city gates, sits on top of the wall, and just starts calmly playing a lute. Sima Yi sees this, and his mind just explodes. He knows Liang's reputation as this brilliant, cunning strategist. He thinks, no way, this has to be a trap. This is too easy. He got so spooked by the idea of what Liang might do, he just turned his entire army around and left. The battle was won without a single sword being drawn. That's the power of reputation. And to kind of wrap up this whole section on managing your image, there's a really key piece of advice from Law 4. Always say less than necessary. And the logic is pretty airtight, right? The more you talk, the more likely you are to say something dumb or reveal something you shouldn't. Powerful people, they don't ramble. They're concise. They intimidate by saying less because it makes other people nervous. They fill in the blanks, usually with something far more impressive than what you would have said anyway. Silence can be a weapon. Okay, so you've got your image under control, but what about everyone else? How do you handle your relationships? This next part is all about navigating that tricky social maze. And I'll give you a heads up, the book's advice here can get pretty cynical. It's really about looking at raw human nature, warts and all. And here's maybe one of the most famous and most controversial laws in the whole book. Law 2, never put too much trust in friends, learn how to use enemies. I know, it sounds harsh, right? But here's the thinking. Your friends, they're more likely to feel envy. And because they're your friends, they won't always be straight with you because they don't want to start an argument. But a former enemy, they expect nothing from you. So if you show them a little kindness or generosity, it's a huge surprise. They're so grateful that they can often become way more loyal than any friend ever would be. And boy, does history have a brutal story for this one. Take the Byzantine Emperor Michael III. He had a friend, Basilius, who was poor. Michael takes him in, educates him, gives him everything, money, power, you name it. He showered the guy with gifts. You'd think that would create loyalty, right? Nope. It created envy. And in the end, Basilius, his so-called best friend, had Michael murdered and took the throne for himself. A pretty chilling example of that law in action. So if you can't just talk your way through things with friendly persuasion, what do? Well, that leads us to Law 9. Win through your actions, never through argument. The book's take is that arguing is basically pointless. Think about it. Even if you technically win an argument, you've probably made the other person feel bad or resentful. You haven't really won anything. It is so much more powerful to just show them you're right without ever having to argue about it. The absolute best story for this is about Michelangelo and his famous statue of David. So he finishes his masterpiece, and the mayor of Florence comes to see it. And he says, "It's great, but the nose is too big." Now, Michelangelo knows the nose is perfect. He could argue, right? But that would just insult his boss. So instead, he does something brilliant. He climbs up the scaffolding with a chisel and a little bit of marble dust he'd hidden in his hand. He taps the chisel lightly, pretending to work, and lets the dust fall. He doesn't actually change a single thing. But the mayor, down below, sees the change and says, "Huh, perfect, now it's a masterpiece." Michelangelo won. He saved his art and his relationship, all through a simple action instead of a pointless argument. Okay, now we're heading into the really deep, dark, Machiavellian waters of the book. This is all about the art of deception, hiding what you really want and throwing people off your trail. And just as a reminder, our job here is just to explain what the book says, not to tell you to go out and do it. One of the main tools for deception the book talks about is the smoke screen. And it's exactly what it sounds like. It's something you do to hide what you're really doing. It can be a big, noble gesture, or pretending you want something you don't, or even just keeping a straight face. The whole point is to distract people, to throw them off your trail so you can make your move without anyone getting in your way. And the law at the very heart of this is Law 3, conceal your intentions. The idea is to always keep people guessing, keep them a little off balance, a little in the dark. Because if nobody knows what your actual endgame is, how can they possibly prepare to stop you? By the time they figure it out, you've already won. If you want a masterclass in this, look no further than Otto von Bismarck. Here's the situation. He secretly wants to go to war with Austria, but he knows the Prussian army isn't strong enough yet. So he puts up a massive smokescreen. He goes around giving these big, passionate speeches about how much he loves Austria and how peace is the only answer. And it worked. Everyone thought he was this reasonable diplomat, so they made him prime minister. He used that time to secretly build up the army. And then, when everything was perfectly in place, he launched the exact war he'd been publicly speaking against, and he crushed it. Classic deception. So yeah, the book basically lays out an entire toolbox for this kind of misdirection. You can pretend to want one thing to hide what you really want. You can act all sincere to send your rivals off on a wild goose chase. Sometimes the best move is just to blend in and look harmless so nobody pays attention to you. And of course, there's the classic noble gesture to hide a totally selfish plan. See the pattern? It's all about controlling what people see and making sure they're looking anywhere but at your real goal. Okay, so we've gone through 47 laws full of very specific, sometimes really rigid advice. And then, just when you think you have it all figured out, the book gets to its final conclusion. And it's maybe the most important lesson of all. True ultimate power comes from being adaptable. This is the final law, Law 48, assume formlessness. And it's kind of a brilliant twist. After giving you 47 seemingly concrete rules, the book's final message is that the real secret is not to be tied down by any of them. Don't be predictable. If you always do the same thing, people will figure you out and you become an easy target. The people who are truly powerful, they're like ghosts. They change and adapt to whatever situation they're in, which makes them impossible to predict and impossible to fight. And this quote just says it all perfectly. Think about water for a second. It has no shape of its own, right? It just takes the shape of whatever contains it. It can be soft and gentle, but it can also be powerful enough to carve through mountains. That's what the book says is the highest form of power. It's about knowing all those other 47 laws, for sure, but it's also about knowing when to use them, when to ignore them, and when to just be completely and utterly unpredictable. So there you have it, our whirlwind tour of the 48 Laws of Power. Look, it's a dense read, and let's be real, it can be a pretty chilling look at strategy and human nature. The biggest takeaway here isn't necessarily a new playbook for you to use. It's about being aware. It's about understanding the game. Because once you know the rules, you might just start to see things a whole lot differently. Thanks for tuning in.